This is Doc Marty with Mental Wellness. We're coming to you from the beautiful downtown studio of KAIR, Roberts, and we thank them enormously for bringing us on the air, which is just a wonderful experience. And as we're looking out, see Main Street across the window way over there. It's quiet. Everything seems to be rather quiet. Driving in this morning, it was very, very quiet. The freeway was almost non-existing vehicles, other than trucks that were moving. So we're working on our month-long odyssey of dealing with the coronavirus. And as we are doing it, we are experiencing many, many reactive states of confusion and upset and finding new ways of coping with life, going back to the 1930s and 1920s. Of interacting with family members in a way that we haven't done in many, many years. If we can get people's hands off of those electronic things, we can actually establish kind of a family get-together kind of experience, which is not a bad thing if it weren't for the fact that so many people are getting sick and potentially dying from this virus. But beyond that, it's an opportunity to really understand the value of what it is that we actually represent. We're hearing numbers of stories of people just seeming to rise to the occasion as far as giving, as far as contributing, helping out each other out. And the stories just keep coming and coming and coming, which I think is just a real testament to the spirit that we have that unfortunately only seems to really manifest itself at times when there's national catastrophes and tragedies. And what we want to spend some time with is actually opening up that sense of giving. And we're going to spend some time talking about that today to try to define it a little bit differently. So perhaps after this is all done and we are recovered from the experience, we might be able to hold on to and keep some of the values that we are now allowing to rise, things we're now beginning to experience. And that's the goodness. That's the goodness of mankind. It's the goodness of giving. And also want to be mindful of the fact that there's also some things going on which is getting no media attention whatsoever that we need to be a little bit more sensitized to, and perhaps a different way of giving and reaching out to folks. And that's what's happening within the realm of family and domestic violence, which unfortunately is spiking. We get way too many people that are confined in spaces, and one of the factors that we know, unfortunately, that builds up the bad numbers is people feeling confined, people feeling stressed, people feeling that they have no alternatives, and what emerges out of that way too often are perpetrators of violence, thinking that they should have power over something. And since they can't manage their own lives in a better way, the power issue tends to be taken out against children and spouses. And it's an issue that is growing, has great alarm to it, especially for the victims of these domestic violence situations where we're being told, these people, women and children are being told, you can't leave. You stay in place because you're not supposed to go anywhere. So that sense of being trapped is actually manifesting itself in a very physical way. And yet we have got to be able to get the message out to these people that if your life or your children's lives are being threatened or jeopardized, it is still okay to leave. And if that means you find yourself, sheltering with a relative or sheltering with a work colleague, you go. There's no value to sticking around and being subjected to that kind of action and behavior. So I wanted to mention that to folks because unfortunately this doesn't go away just because there's a virus out there. And the opposite seems to be true, is that the increased stress for those people is that they act out more, not less. And it tends to get reported far less because a lot of the people who are being victimized by it don't have the outlets to report it in ways that they might report it even if they were going to. I'm reminded of the fact that children who are being unfortunately abused in school environments will tend to share that with other peers in school far more readily than they will share it with an adult. And when a friend of somebody who's being victimized is hearing this awful stuff happening in this person's house, the tendency is for them to go talk to a teacher or a counselor or a principal who then has to, by state law, report it. And a lot of these cases are reported in by school personnel who are being told by peers. And that right now, because schools are not in session, is an avenue that's not happening. So what has in the past been the primary way that children have had for getting help by talking to other children is not there. Same thing is happening in childcare environments too. So we're looking at, a situation that is the downside, a real downside of what's happening out there. And I do want to bring it to people's attention and make it aware, because sometimes just the awareness of hearing something going on in a house next to yours or an apartment next to yours or above yours, wherever you may be living, is not a signal to ignore it. It's a signal to do something about it, which is another way that we can reach out and help our fellow human beings. So that's kind of a message, call it a public service announcement if you wish. But it's part of the awareness that I think too often we get so absorbed in our own life situations with our own families that we forget that there's some other need out there. And it's a need that has been there for, unfortunately, centuries. And it is a good thing that we have the capability to respond to it. And that we do. We take it into our hearts because people deserve to be helped. So that's my soapbox for the day. And we're going to move on to talking about some healthy, positive ways that our mental health can be actually improved by understanding what's really going on inside of our own minds and inside of our hearts, as opposed to the flow of information that we're getting from news media, which is not concerned about how we're feeling, but it's only concerned about its numbers and how things are getting reported. So we're going into that. At the same time, we're also going to talk about a very interesting phenomenon. It's a concept that was developed, oh goodness, many, many years ago. It was actually the basic concept of my doctoral dissertation back in the late 70s, early 80s. It dealt with the concept of burnout and what we are experiencing from all of the continuous stress situations that we're finding ourselves right now is a state of perpetual burnout. And it's not just a coined phrase that was popular back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but it's actually a psychological phenomenon, meaning that given the right circumstances, almost anybody can experience it. And what we experience actually goes through stages, similar to how we stage going through grief. But in this case, it's not a good thing. Because once you get done, staging, going through the stages of grief, there's a resolution phase, and you're able to recover and resume, normal kinds of activities and thought processes. With burnout, it goes the opposite direction. We become less capable of experiencing situations in life, to the point where we become almost immobilized. In some cases, we can be threatened with some pretty dire kinds of things, including alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and even suicide. So it's not a pleasant thing to talk about, but I think we need to be aware of it because we can be on the lookout for it, not just with ourselves, but also with our family members and people that we are interacting with, because it is a very common factor. And it's one that typically gets no attention from the media, because the media, for the most part, doesn't understand it enough to know how to report it. And we are going to do that. So all along, we are also going to be focusing on meditation. We're going to focus on stress release. We're going to focus on relaxation. And the single most important part of us, which is our self-empowerment, to be able to maintain inner control and to be able to maintain our perspective of what's happening. So with that in mind, we are going to move into what is commonly referred to as a break. And the interesting phenomena that happens with breaks is that I stop talking for maybe a minute or so, and everything else that's going on in the world you can catch up on. When we get back, I'm going to give you my contact information and run through some of the emails that we've been getting. A lot of really important, I think, questions are being asked by folks who are tuning in and listening to our program, which I'm very grateful for. The email address, and I'll get to the other ones as soon as we come back from break, but the email address is docmarty, DOCMARTY, 61 at, where we go? Oh, we're still here. At gmail.com. Again, it's docmarty61 at gmail.com. Just had a couple people go by the window and wave. And nice of you to see. So anyway, we'll get back with some of the other address and contact information when we come back from the break in just a few minutes. Be right back. This is Doc Marty with Mental Wellness, welcoming you back. Our contact information, as I've mentioned before, the best way to get hold of me with questions about things you'd like answered on air is through docmarty, it's docmarty61, DOCMARTY 61 at gmail.com. And the website, if you wish to take a look at our website, we've got all kinds of interesting articles on there, as well as a biography of me and all kinds of other things that are interesting, including some of the classes that I teach. as well as some of the supervision programs that I run, and the different kinds of therapies we do, for that matter. That address is www.alliedmentalhealth. Let's see, alliedmentalhealthtx.com. Allied, ALLIED, mental, MENTALTAL, health, HEALTH, TX for Texas.com. Why my voice is leaving me at the moment, but it is. So I'm going to struggle through that and get over it very quickly. Again, the other ways of getting hold of me are through directly through telephone, which I'd love to get to. And phone number to reach me at is 281-812-3322. 281-812-3322. That is a call that goes into Houston, which is close to where my office is, actually in Kingwood. And their studio, which is in Humble, is directly in between Kingwood, Humble, to Houston. We're all kind of connected. So with that in mind, we're going to move into some of the emails that have come in. And they're fascinating emails. One came in from a gal in her mid-60s, wanting to know why it was so important that she not be allowed to interact with her mother, who is in a nursing home. And she said that she doesn't have any of the symptoms, her mother doesn't have any of the symptoms, and she was just, really confused as to why she was not being allowed to see her mom, which is pretty sad. And yet at the same time, we got a public health issue that really is very concerned about not just what you might bring into that place, but what you may take out of that place if there are people who are sick. And it's unfortunate that we are having to tighten down that interactive ability for people, particularly for folks that are dealing with older parents who are looking for that contact, and they only see it for brief moments, daily or every other day or once a week. And it's very important for these folks to have their contacts. And at the same time, it's very difficult for these older people to have access to social networking, to have the computer knowledge to be able to go online with people, to be able to communicate, do FaceTiming and those kind of things. So it is hard, it is difficult to get through, and yet at the same time, because of the infectious nature of the coronavirus, a lot of facilities, especially facilities that are housing aged people, older people, the decision has to be made to protect those people from any kind of contagious situations. So that's the best answer I can give you. I know it doesn't make you feel better, but it's just kind of a logical way of dealing with a situation that has total chaos and illogic based in it. Okay, next question came in from a vet who wanted to know why it is he goes down to the VA. He's been gone down there 4 times now in the last 3 weeks and can't get his testing done. He's got several symptoms that he thinks are directly byproducts or part of the coronavirus, and the VA is not testing. And he's being told we don't have tests. He's wanting to know what should he do. Probably quarantine yourself, I would say, number one, and stay away from people. Because if you do have the virus, the last thing you want to be doing is spreading it to other folks. Why the VA doesn't have tests? Unfortunately, that's one of those questions that needs to go back to Washington, because I have no clue. I think it's just absolutely disastrous that we take care of our vets as badly as we do most of the time. And in this situation, it's even worse, because being able to test these folks, especially some of the vets that are up in age and are clearly having symptoms that are similar to what we've been told to be looking out for, they can't go to their primary support system, which should be through the VA system, because it's just inadequate. So, I wish I could give you a better answer on that one, but I really don't have a better answer for you, other than possibly calling your congressman and congresswoman and ask, where are the tests for the VA? Why aren't we getting them? Why aren't we able to access the system in a way that would make sense? So, to answer your question, that's about the best I can do for you. Another one came in from an 18-year-old wanting to know why it is that he's not being allowed to go to the beach. And, the best thing I can tell you is that we don't need people out congregating right now. The virus is highly contagious. And even though you may not come down with any of the symptoms, and there are lots and lots of people who are asymptomatic, meaning they don't have the symptoms, but they are carrying the virus because they've been exposed to it. And the last thing you'd want to do is to bring it into your home, or be interacting with your parents or siblings or grandparents, and they come down with the illness. We don't know who's a carrier and who isn't. And until we have a system where we're actually able to test people to actually come up with real numbers instead of the ones that are getting thrown around a lot, we have a serious problem. And that problem is the contagious aspect of this illness. So we're doing what we need to be able to do, which is to quarantine areas. We finally got the order to quarantine or cut off the beaches, access to the beaches in Galveston, which has been a major bone of contention for a lot of people. Like, we're seeing all these people congregating down there, having a good time, interacting with each other, none of them following any kind of social consciousness about maintaining distance and just having a good time. And then we get left with the residue of that effect, which is the spread of the virus. We understand that right now the governor of Texas has also taken the next step, which is to close the border, believe it or not, between Louisiana and Texas. Every single road coming into the state of Texas, out of the state of Louisiana, is now being manned by state troopers who are quarantining people coming in, whether you're from Texas or Louisiana or anywhere else. When you cross that border, you're being told you are going to quarantine yourself for 14 days. And there's actually a mechanism now being put in place to make sure that actually happens. And there are troopers who are being assigned to knock on doors to see who it is that's being quarantined, whether you're there or not. If you're not there, there's a sizable fine, I believe over a $10,000 fine, for actually exposing what may be coming from Louisiana. And I think that the reason for that is that it took the good folks in Louisiana to wake up and realize this is a serious issue. It's time we start responding to it better. They're now predicting that New Orleans is about to get hit with its own pandemic reaction because they've been basically ignoring the whole situation, pretending like it's not going to affect them somehow. Which is also the message that came out of Mississippi and Florida for a number of weeks now. So now that people are waking up, now we're going to go through this entire process all over again, similar to what we've experienced in New York. It's now apparently hitting Chicago and Detroit and Los Angeles. I'm getting information is also going through this process now. Of thousands of people who are going to get sick. And it's gearing up into Houston, obviously, with them shutting down that border. And, we're going to see where that goes. For right now, we're going to move into our own personal self-care. The information about us, the stuff that we actually have to deal with, because we are important too. And that awareness of how we're experiencing what we're experiencing, we are going to move into because it's worthy of our consideration of feeling better, which is something that unfortunately we tend to discount a lot. So we're going to move, and as we move, what we're looking at is that when people are exposed to the kind of stress that we are being exposed to right now, which is systematic, meaning it's happening across the board, it's unrelenting, meaning there is no let up in it, we're not getting any break from it, and that it tends to be a chronic situation because it's not going away. Even after it peaks with the reports of it, now they're talking about it resurging itself again come fall, assuming that it's going to back off a little bit from the first wave after it does what it does. People are going to assume that they're safe, and a lot of the silent carriers, the ones that are asymptomatic, are going to be circulating out, and it could very easily reignite itself into another reactive state. A lot of people getting sick. And that nature is what leads to the concept of burnout. What we know about burnout is that it is the extension of this stress. We used to refer to it as chronic unrelenting stress syndrome that became an issue because people were getting physically sick from the stress. At least we finally understood that people were getting, we've known about it since the 1930s, that people got sick from too much stress. What we're also discovering, though, is that because we are now creating this psychological factor, meaning that people feel trapped, people feel that they don't have hope, people are losing sense of taking care of themselves, there's a sense of victimization, and now we're feeling trapped because we're being forced to stay home and not interact with people. What we're discovering is that it's becoming a serious issue in the regard that burnout tends to take on some really strange kind of reactive states. There's different factors that go into it. And what we have discovered is that the whole issue is not just saying I'm burned out or I'm burning out. It's really understanding what that means, because it's taking the stress into an internal state where we start to feel sick. That's the first part. The second part is that we start depersonalizing the people around us. We start looking at ways of not interacting with them because they're not like us or they don't understand us. or we segregate ourselves away because only we or I am experiencing what I'm experiencing and you can't possibly understand it. Therefore, I'm not going to communicate with you. So that quality of disreality starts to set in, where you start seeing yourself as being not only different, but totally unique, which obviously is not an accurate perception, but we believe it to be true because we're in a state of panic. And then it goes into that disreality, meaning that we're losing track with what's real. And we start distorting, we start manufacturing information, we start coming up with alarms that don't need to be sounded. And we take on this very different perception of self-management, which is based on gloom and doom. It's based on a sense that there is no control factor, there is nothing that's going to guide us through this process, that somehow maybe God has abandoned us, that there's nothing of value to hold on to any longer. And when we hit that state, unfortunately, then we start looking at ways of soothing ourselves, which comes through with increased alcohol. It comes through with a lot of pot smoking for younger generation people, but now we're finding it also true in older populations. A lot of chronic abuse of drugs that are being prescribed for pain management now being abused as ways of chilling out or calming down. We start finding street drugs taking on more and more popularity just because people are sick and tired of not being able to cope with. We also find a lot of eating disorders that tend to come flaring up, mostly binge eating, but also other kinds of ways of trying to present images of what we think we should be rather than who we really are. So the dietary system gets thrown out of whack, our metabolism is getting thrown out of whack, and we are literally getting sick of being sick. So the worrying takes on its own negative thing. Now, the way to get out of that system is to get back out of it. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous because it's basically backing yourself up. It's going back to a state of mind when things were in control for you. And that means reflecting backwards. What were you doing a year ago? What were you doing 2 years ago? I mean, in some cases, the Houston area, we got to go back before the flooding from the hurricane because nothing seems to be normal since that happened. That's coming up on almost 3 years, well, 2.75 years now. It was in August of a couple of years ago. So we're coming up on a long-term process of devastation and people getting harmed and lives being lost, property being damaged beyond belief. And then things kind of calmed down for a little while. People started rebuilding, started regrouping themselves again, and now we're getting hit with this thing. So it's happening in rapid succession, which is where this nature, this unrelenting stress is coming from, meaning that we are, in this area at least, we are all prone to experiencing burnout. We see it quite often with teachers, where they go through an entire school year of giving and giving and giving, and then they get hit with a test that they have to get all their kids to pass. And there's an enormous amount of pressure that's built up on them to make sure all these kids succeed. And it's being applied from the states, the government, from the local areas, from school principals. And towards the end of the school year, which typically would start to be into now, as we get into April and May, all of a sudden it's not happening, but we have a different kind of stress going on right now because nobody knows what's going to actually happen with all of this testing that's supposed to take place. So it's a big unknown. And the fear factor is that once we go back into schools, it's going to be immediately upon us. And these teachers are going to have to gear up in an incredible way just to get their students ready to take that test. Unless, of course, the governor steps in and says, we're going to bypass the test this year because there's no logical reason to have to put everybody through that situation. So we've got that burnout issue going on. We've got the burnout of care workers, the folks that are out there on the front line that are seeing people coming into hospital settings that are having to triage these people in terms of critical care issues. And it's creating, again, an enormous amount of stress because a lot of these folks have families of their own that they're not seeing, they're not attending to. And yet, we still have these people that are out there doing their jobs because they're healthcare workers. We're seeing the toll it's taking on mental health workers as well, because that constant assurance that is being necessary to give to clients is missing for themselves. So they're giving and giving, but they're not getting a whole lot back other than their own awareness that they're helping everybody else. And yet their need to feel safe and in your control may be seriously being questioned. So we've got lots of factors going on. We're going to back this up. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about moving out of that burnout stage, wherever people may be, to regain the inner self-control. So again, send in your emails if you'd like. I'd be glad to read them, and I love responding to them. They go to docmarty61 marty61@gmail.com. DOC, Marty, MARTY, 61@gmail.com. And we will be right back. This is Doc Marty with Mental Wellness. We're running a little extra time today. One of those dual factors that there's a lot of information that we want to get out, and it's relevant. I hate being talked to when it's not relevant, but hopefully it's relevant, and I guess you guys will decide that for yourselves. Back to some self-care issues. We've gone over these about stress a few times. The need to be able to relax, be able to kick back, listening to music, playing, doing fun kind of things. We've also talked about, how we can actually involve ourselves differently in our own mental process through using self-hypnosis. And one of the things we're going to do is to actually talk about what that actually looks like, because we understand that the mind is a very, very powerful tool. And in times of amazing stress, it is our minds that gets us through this, because we're sharing ourselves, we're sharing thoughts, images, we're also sharing love, we're sharing prayers, we're sharing hope, and it has to be contagious. We've got to be able to feed on that positive energy to offset feeding off the negative energy. We've got to neutralize that out in order for us to get back in control of what's going on. So one of the techniques that we use in group meditation is by having people together, which unfortunately we can't do physically right now because that's not safe. However, we can do it in spirit. We can do it through the internet, which is an interesting concept when you think of spirit. However, it does work because the energy that we can share actually goes through the air, believe it or not. And we have an ability to actually share vibrations and positive imaging and positive thinking with each other. It's one of the more powerful tools that we have. And I know we've just gone through a situation where a group of musicians from all over the world got together. Something that was organized by a group of folks over in England, including Elton John, who actually pulled together hundreds of musicians. And at the same time, they all began singing same songs. And the intent with that is to send out a universal vibration of positive messaging. I don't know how well received it was. I do know that, unfortunately, in this country, we didn't get word of it until it already happened. So we weren't able to actually get involved with it, and the media didn't pick up on it until the event had already occurred over the weekend. I would strongly encourage our professional musicians to perhaps take a look at doing something like that here, what we did with the Farm Aid many years ago, as a way of banding people back together. We can watch television, and we can watch things through our internet. And if there were a way to coordinate that with people, willing to give a little of their time to make that happen, we could have a very positive effect. The value of being able to share prayer is becoming even more pronounced, because we're seeing more and more churches and synagogues saying we can't do this together as congregations in a physical location. It's too risky, basically, to spread the illness. So what we are going to do is we're going to put it out over the internet. We're going to put it out over television and radio networks, which is a fine traditional thing that we've been doing for decades and decades. The dilemma is that it's never been really well coordinated except by individual churches, or however that information has gone out. Part of our messaging would be to begin to bring people together in an ecumenical kind of way of bringing universal prayer together, so that those who are wanting to be that focused on communicating with each other through spirit are capable of doing it. And we actually open up a venue to make that happen. So again, what we're doing is sharing that energy, that positive energy, and allowing the vibrations of goodness to be permeating out to offset the permeation of the germs that are getting people sick. So we're going to move into that direction. Individually, we're going to focus on messaging. It's one of the things we started putting out last time. And we're going to continue to do that, because you can be in control of what you're experiencing, even in a pandemic situation. The understanding that we are whole allows us to experience wholeness in a different kind of context. And we start looking at the duality of the word whole. We see wholeness as being all together. We also see the image of whole being an empty thing in the middle, like a donut hole. And yet the words are two different things, have two different meanings, but if you bring them together, what you end up with is a whole package. It's a whole understanding that your mind works unconsciously and consciously. The feelings are processed through your head to understand the feelings and through your heart, which is how we have the emotion. It's how we interject. It's the way we communicate outward. And it's that sharing concept, the dualities of how we process, that we begin to focus on individually. And as we do that, we begin to send out, we begin to resonate out an energy that is very positive. So as you're contemplating yourself, you begin to imagine what's going to be like, what you're going to be like a year after this situation is all over. Because the goodness of what we're experiencing, that sense of being able to reach out and care and love each other, becomes an overriding value. It's taught in every serious religion that we've had going back 6,000 years. And too often we kind of lose track of it because we get so preoccupied with day-to-day functioning. And yet right now we are looking for that value as a way of recentering ourselves, of keeping balance, being able to assure our children things are going to be as okay as they can be. So what we are focused on now is an inner sense of peace. How you achieve that inner sense of peace is to release out your conscious thinking. All the negative thoughts, all the negative understandings of what you're hearing from outside of yourself, and you center into yourself. You do that by breathing deeply. You do it by getting in touch with your heart so that you can stop thinking. You experience what it's like to relax deeply. And as you do that, you begin to give yourself a message, a singular message that you are in control, that your feelings are reflective of what you're experiencing, that no feeling has to dominate your experience. So you start to build that strength. And you do this continuously throughout the day. It doesn't take much more than 2 or 3 minutes, but it becomes very important after you've done it 15 or 20 times, because you start to believe that there is an inner control. It's a message that is important for all of us to be following right now, because it is something that we can do. And when you think about the importance of being in an action that results in something positive, it becomes a no-brainer. Because you begin to feel what you want to experience. And that inner control becomes contagious. So for right now, as we sign off our program for today, I would encourage each of you to identify that one message, that one sentence about you that you believe to be true. Not because you want to, not because you've been told to, not because anybody else has suggested it, but an internal message of you feeling that you are in control, that you are important, that you have strength, and that you have value. And what I would ask that you do is that once you identify those words, whether it's 6 words or 12 words, don't make it too long, because it doesn't have to be. It's something you're going to be repeating to yourself throughout the day. I'd like for you to email me your message. And I promise not to use your names or in any way to identify you, but I'd like for you to bring that over so that we can actually put it out on our next program so that you can hear it and others can hear it. And we can create this whole chain of positive messaging. So with that in mind, we're going to be signing off. I do encourage you to please, send me your emails, docmarty61@gmail.com. To call me, 281-812-3322. To go to our website. If you are feeling a need to get some professional help for yourself and you want to connect with me, that's fine. We do it over the internet. You don't have to actually live in Houston in order for you to see me, because we do have this internet system that actually works well. We also have podcasts that are going out now, which is another way for you to be able to catch the messages, because we repeat this program. Besides, Mondays when it's live, we also repeat it Wednesdays at noon, as well as Saturdays at noon, and then again at 9 o'clock in the evening. And it's available through YouTube. You go into the radio station's channel, which is KAIR. Well, it's actually radio, KAIR.com. And once you go into their specific channel on YouTube, look for Doc Marty, and there's an episode number. I think today's will be 14. And you can look at any of the ones that are already listed out there and check them out. Listen to them. Please give me feedback. I love getting feedback. If you don't like what I'm doing, let me know that. I have, I can pretty much take that. Pretty much. Yeah, but if there's something particular that you want to address, if there's something that's important for you that we aren't covering, that you would like covered, please send it off, and we'll see what we can do about getting it on the air. Or I'll respond to it personally. So that's how you contact me. And again, the podcasts are going out. I know Spotify is now running it. I do not believe that iTunes is, but there's a third network or platform that is carrying it as well. So feel free to check that out and let me know how it's being received on your end. So with that in mind, I'm going to sign off and wish you all a healthy week of self-care, caring for those that you love, and we will see you next time.